There you go, Star Wars. Today, NOTCAST episode 27 or 28. I think it's the 14th of December 2020. And I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to talk about the Star Wars prequels. But I thought, pardon me, I've just drunk a fizzy drink, you'd appreciate opening with a fanfare. So pretend it's Lucasfilm, and there it goes, fading away into the background as yellow text scrolls up behind you, which will tell you it was a dark and stormy night in the world of Star Wars. I'm going to talk about the Star Wars prequels. Don't know how many episodes this is going to be. It could be 9, it could be 3. I could start with episode 4, end on episode 3, and maybe that makes some sense of how the world's economy is so totally screwed up, because Star Wars taught people to count with 4, 5, 6, then 1, 2, 3, then to go to 7, 8, 9, and by the way, to throw an extra couple of numbers in between. So it kind of goes, if you think about Star Wars as how to learn how to maths, or how to do math, it goes 4, 5, 6, then you do let's say 4.1, which is the Ewok movies, and then you do episodes 1, 2, 2.5, 2 3/4, episode 3, then you jump to 7, then you go back to 3.5, then you go back to about 3.9 with Rogue One, then you go to 8, then you go to 9, and at the same time you go into The Mandalorian, and it all gets a bit skewy, and what order you watch Star Wars films really kind of defines which ones you like and which ones you don't. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to add like a little perspective on that. Normally, people say the original films are great, the prequels are a bit crappy, and the sequels are either fantastic or dire, depending on your point of view. But we're going to have to turn this on its head a little bit, okay? Because I don't think the prequels get anywhere near the amount of love and respect that they deserve. And before you click away from the comments or go and watch something else, just hear me out. If the films had been watched in the sequential order of the narrative, which is starting with The Phantom Menace and ending with The Return of the Jedi, I guarantee you people would think that George Lucas was a stunning filmmaker, blessed with an incredible vision. Now, I'm going to explain why, and this is not me. I'm not apologising for the prequels. They're really good overall. One of them is really bad, but another couple really good. When you think about when the story had started off, if you open up with The Phantom Menace, you've got this huge and enormous world that you're only really seeing in glimpses, in the same way that the original films introduce to you the world of Star Wars through just casually name-checking, the battle of wherever, and doing the Castle Run in 12 parsecs, or any of that stuff, or you fought in the Clone Wars, and just assume with that. Phantom Menace, I know it's a boring film about taxation and trade disputes, but if it was the first film that you saw in the Star Wars universe, even in 1999, if you hadn't seen the other movies, I guarantee you, your mind would be blown, because there was nothing else that was like it at that time that was in the cinemas. Nothing that was anywhere even vaguely near it. When The Phantom Menace came out, there wasn't Lord of the Rings, there certainly weren't the Avengers movies, there was only really Star Wars and Star Trek that was doing anything even vaguely like this, and Star Trek was a bunch of goody two-shoes tear-arsing around the galaxy, making everything better for everyone else and violating the Prime Directive. So if The Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith have been 3 movies on their own, I guarantee you that everyone would go, my God, they're incredible. Because you start off, Phantom Menace is a standalone movie that introduces a whole world and universe to you that you may not necessarily know, and it kind of reveals itself bit by bit. Also, of course, Phantom Menace gives you one of the finest movie posters of all time. Now, I'm flicking through a book here. I should have got this open sooner, but you know me, I just kind of do it as I go along. So, one of the best movie posters of all time is the teaser poster for The Phantom Menace itself. Sadly, I'm looking through a book of all the Star Wars posters, and I've forgotten which page it was at. It's just that incredible picture at Tatooine, which is this picture of Jake Lloyd here. And if you look carefully, you can see the shadow is Darth Vader. That tells you everything you need to know. Now, if you hadn't seen a Star Wars movie, you'd be going, okay, it's a kid full of hopes and dreams. And there in the background is a shadow, a mysterious shadow of a man. And you go, what is all that about? People will be talking about that in hushed tones. But they don't, because we already knew what was going to happen. But if you were 7, 8 when the film was starting, and when the Phantom Menace came out, and by the way, here's the final printed artwork for the Phantom Menace. This is a poster you probably haven't seen. That's really quite something. And what you have with the Phantom Menace is a movie where you go, okay, so it's two goody two shoes, really boring Jedis. They probably never had sex, never fallen in love, going around solving the world's problems, and then all of a sudden they get hampered. As a standalone movie, the Phantom Menace is a phenomenal vision of science fiction, and the only way that the Phantom Menace itself actually suffers is firstly because it's not Star Wars as you remember it, because if you were 10 when Return of the Jedi came out, you would have been 27, maybe 26 when The Phantom Menace came out. And The Phantom Menace is a kids' movie in the way that Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone is a kids' book. Now, you read the Harry Potter books, the use of language and style changes and becomes more complicated as it goes along. So the first book is written in a it's very thin. It's got very straightforward sentence construction. The use of language and grammar is very very simplistic, but it lays out everything for you. And then the language and the complications and the dexterities and intricacies of the books change and become more complicated as each year carries on through Harry Potter. So by the time you get to the last book, dealing with a fully adult theme, fully adult writing style. And the Star Wars movies are exactly the same. The Phantom Menace is a kids' movie. It's designed to be watched by 7 or 8 year olds who have their minds blown about laser swords and space knights and warp speeds and God knows what else, and pod races. And it's a kids' movie, and if you see it as a kids' movie, and you see it as the story that's told from a childlike perspective, it becomes a very, very different movie. Now, where the Phantom Menace is not great is it has fart jokes, it has crass slapstick, it has Jar Jar Binks, and it has the Lemurians, and those are the 4 things that really, really suffer in the film. Also, apart from the fact that it's the hunt for the global spark plug. So you start off with the 4 things about the movie I don't like, and I'm going to start with Jar Jar Binks and the Lemurians, because the use of language, the use of accents that they have, the use of dialect is borderline racist on occasions. The Nemodians or Nemudians or Nemoidians or whatever they are, they talk like people who are trying to do a bad impersonation of a gangster. His blockade is perfectly legal, and it's kind of like if you're 10 years old and you're trying to do the voice of Super Mario, for example, it's that kind of thing. Jar Jar Binks, and he goes, "Oh, Misa so happy," and all that, and it's like, no, that's not good. That use of language is too simplistic. It's too childish. So it straddles the line between childlike and childish. And there's if you can find them on YouTube, there are things called anti-cheese edits, or maybe not on YouTube, maybe on Vimeo, maybe on Mega, of the Phantom edit versions of the anti-cheese edits of the Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and of course, Revenge of the Sith. I don't know why I said that in a Sean Connery accent. Are out there, and they make the films completely different. So, for example, on the anti-cheese edit of the Phantom Menace, the Nemoidians have subtitled dialogue, and they use, I think, one of the alternate language tracks from the DVD. So maybe if you're Portuguese, you're watching it and you go, "Oh, they're speaking Portuguese," but the subtitles don't match up. The subtitles make them far more devious, far more cunning, and less like interstellar fuckwits. And then you've got Jar Jar Binks, and again they do the same thing. Use a different language track, and then they change and overdub the subtitles so that Jar Jar Binks isn't quite so annoying, so cloying, so stupid, so childish. Now there's a theory that in fact the whole of the Star Wars universe couldn't exist without Jar Jar Binks, because Jar Jar Binks is effectively the court jester in the movie. He's the fool, and he gets played like a fool throughout the second and third film because he's innocent, he's childlike, he's naive, he's trusting, and he's manipulated by other people into making stuff happen. And without him, none of it would happen. But because he believes that everyone is lovely, he goes along and tries to do the right thing and ends up not actually being, being just a pawn in the Emperor's much, much bigger game. So The Phantom Menace, I think, is a really great movie. In many ways, has a couple of things about it that are terrible. Please, if you can find it, watch the anti-cheese edit. It makes The Phantom Menace considerably less rubbish. It takes The Phantom Menace from probably about a 7 out of 10 to probably a 9 out of 10. And by the way, if I'm ranking Star Wars movies, The Phantom Menace definitely comes in the bottom 3. But it had a brave and bold vision, and I think it was a science fiction classic. Because if you'd never seen a Star Wars movie, and bearing in mind only George Lucas was making Star Wars movies, people became jaded by 30 years of watching Star Wars. So when The Phantom Menace came out, 24 years after Star Wars was written, 22 years after it came out, people have had 22 years of imitators. And if you hadn't had any of that, you just came into Star Wars, Phantom Menace, blank page, knew nothing about it, you were like, my God, this film is bold, and it's brave, and it's ballsy, and it's got a weird-ass pod race, and, it's as rich as Star Wars in terms of the world that's been built around it. But it's got dull storytelling. As I said, it's the hunt for the intergalactic sparkplug for most of the movie. There's a fascinating world that sits inside there, and there's great mythologies that sit inside that movie. But it's not that good a movie because effectively it's a chase movie where the car breaks down and they need to get the car fixed. So it is, it's the hunt for the the AA of Tatooine to come and fix the spaceship. We've got a couple of really interesting things in it. As I said, it's kind of told from a childlike perspective, so it's all kind of seen through the prism of an 8 or 9-year-old. And when you see the film through the prism of an 8 or 9-year-old, the world is very black and white, very straightforward. Good and evil very clearly demarcated. Evil, of course, wears a beard. Hello. And or horns, obviously. And it's got a couple of things in it that are really, really immortal. It's got the best lightsaber fight of any of the Star Wars movies. George has a really strong vision around the pod race, and effectively with the pod race that we have in Phantom Menace, he's making his version of American Graffiti in space. We've got the Duel of the Fates, which is John Williams' probably best single track. And we've got the toilet humour. We've got on the 2019 Blu-ray, by the way, you have a fully CGI Yoda. So they went in and changed the puppet. And you've also got, by the way, the spaceship from 2001 is in the background of Watto's junk shop. And that's, by the way, and I wrote this down, 33 minutes, 45 seconds into the movie. It is canon. We've got ETs in Phantom Menace as well, and we've got a 2001 spaceship. So it really is a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. It's not just being made up. It's somewhere far away. If we looked way up into space right now, and bearing in mind how long it takes for light to travel from one year to another, if you had a microscope, in theory, you could point it at the Death Star battle that would probably be happening right now, but we don't have microscopes or telescopes that are powerful enough to do it. Certainly not since the Arecibo made its bid for freedom and collapsed in on itself. So what I'm going to tell you really is I think The Phantom Menace is a great movie. If it was the first film that you'd seen in the series, if the other movies hadn't existed, if we hadn't been jaded by 22 years of watching Star Wars rip-offs and movies as bad as Battlestar Galactica and Saturn III, then if Phantom Menace had come out completely on its own in 1999, people would be going, it's a game changer, in the same way that The Matrix was a game changer. It'd be mind-blowing, and there'd probably be lots of people that would be dropping ease and watching it and going, oh my God, it's amazing. And it's pretty good. It's not amazing, but it's pretty good. Now, on a side note, The Phantom Menace was the film that had the biggest number of rip-off spin-off books ever. So much so that I think they printed something like 14 million copies of various books, novelisations, paperbacks, comic adaptations, art books around the movies, and it put one of the publishers out of business. Because they simply just printed up so many copies and nobody wanted to buy them. Now, on another thing I will say about the Phantom Menace is I experienced it in less than optimum conditions for the first time. It came out in the US in May 1999, and it came out in the UK around July the 27th, 1999. Which means if you wanted to find out what happened in Star Wars: The Phantom Menace, you either had to buy the book, buy the screenplay, by the art book. These were all published way in advance, by the way, or the novelisation. Now, the novelisation of Star Wars was published 6 months before the movie came out. But if you want to look at it says further episode 1 titles from Random House, and you've got Star Wars episode 1, the illustrated screenplay, the novel, then you've got in September, you've got, let's think, the art of episode 1, you've also got the graphic novel that came out, you've got the souvenir magazine, you've got 2 poster magazines, you've got a bi-monthly magazine and a weekly comic, which means that if you wanted to find out what happened in Star Wars The Phantom Menace before it came out at the cinema, you just go and buy the books and you buy the comics. And, that's how you realise, oh, they really were thinking of Ewan McGregor, weren't they, when they were doing the concept art, even though they hadn't cast him at that point, and you end up kind of going, so the film exists in your head before you've seen it. Or in my case, we had a VHS copy that someone had recorded using a camcorder in a cinema in America, flew it over to Britain, started copying it, and I got something like a 3rd generation copy of it that I watched in early June, a couple of weeks after the movie came out in the US. So my first experience of watching The Phantom Menace, thanks to staggered international release dates, was a 3rd generation VHS copy from an audience recording. And it sat there on my desk for about 2 days, and I'm like, I can watch a new Star Wars movie. I can watch the Star Wars movie 2 months before it comes out in Britain. Am I going to watch it? Yeah, I'm going to watch it. But it took me 2 days of thinking, do I want to experience it in the cinema? And I was like, I can't wait another 2 months, knowing the VHS tape of the film is sitting on my desk, just waiting for me to stick it in and press play. So, I know a guy that flew over from the UK to the US to watch The Phantom Menace in the cinemas 2 months before it came out. He was probably heartbroken because it wasn't as good as he wanted it to be. But The Phantom Menace is really, really good. It's just not the cure for cancer. It's not the best movie ever made. It's a very, very good science fiction movie, and the anti-cheese edit gets rid of the fart jokes and the slightly dodgy characters by redubbing them and putting them into subtitles. So I'd recommend it. Now, it all went a bit quiet for a while, and then 2002 we saw The Attack of the Clones. Terrible title, great movie. And again, if this was only the second Star Wars movie that you'd watch, you'd be like, okay, who's this dude on the front? Oh, that's Anakin Skywalker, that kid from the first one. He's grown up, so he's 10 years older. And Obi-Wan Kenobi's changed a little. Now, obviously, Qui-Gon Jinn died in The Phantom Menace, which, if you want to go for a no spoilers approach, by the way, don't buy the soundtrack album for The Phantom Menace, because it's got a track called Qui-Gon's Noble End, and on the line below it, it's got Qui-Gon's funeral. I'm like, guys, thanks. Can't you at least name the songs or the tracks in such a way that doesn't clearly give away what actually happens in the movie? By the way, the soundtrack to Attack of the Clones, The Phantom Menace, and The Revenge of the Sith were never released on vinyl at the time because vinyl was a dead format. So suck that, format fetishes. But no, Attack of the Clones came out 2002. I think it's a really underrated film, and it's really underrated for a number of reasons. Now, the first one, a lot of people will point to it and go, Hayden Christensen can't act his way out of a paper bag. He's a terrible actor. He did an awful job. No, he didn't do an awful job of Anakin Skywalker. Full stop. End of story. Anakin Skywalker was written in The Attack of the Clones to be a petulant, annoying, childish, immature brat who had powers that he couldn't control. And that's exactly the character that Hayden Christensen pointed out and played on screen. He played a childish, annoying brat who was immature, not in control of his powers, and wasn't really grown up enough for the skills or for the power that he had. And so if you think Hayden Christensen is an annoying, childish, immature brat on screen, then that means he's done a good job of acting the character that he was told to act, which was a childish, annoying, immature brat. And if you don't like that, face it, you've never been a teenager. You kind of went from the age of about 12 to 24 and you blanked out all the stuff where hair's growing in places that you don't otherwise realise, and you start to go, oh, girls, and all the stuff that comes with it, and being full of, you know, hormones and emotions and everything that comes in. Now, I was a teenager. In fact, I spent at least 1 year being 18, and you know, I remember that quite vividly. I was probably not as annoying as Hayden Christensen. I also didn't have a lightsaber, and I wasn't in a celibate order of space knights. So that kind of made my childhood and my 18-year-oldsness and my puberty a little bit more bearable than Anakin Skywalker, who not only was having to deal with all of that, but also having to deal with the fact that he was forbidden from ever falling in love or fancying anybody ever again. And, you know, frankly, if someone had said to me, well, look, mate, you know, you're 18, but you can go and hang around with a laser sword and you can kill people, but you can't meet a girl, I would be probably even more annoying than Hayden Christensen. If I already am, don't forget to tell me. That's what a comments box is for. But Attack of the Clones, again, each one of the Star Wars movies is a genre movie, and they deal in different genres. So Phantom Menace is, you know, the chase movie where they're being chased by the bad guy and they have to get the princess away from the invasion, and then they have to solve the invasion. Attack of the Clones is a good old-fashioned whodunit. Who killed the shapeshifter at the beginning of the movie that was tasked with killing Padme? That's what it is. It's a hunt for the killer. It's basically Cluedo with lasers. And what they do is they follow a very linear kind of track through it as they go through this, through that, through the other. Now, lots of action movies these days, in fact, lots of movies, full stop, tend to stop and pause and have an action sequence about every 20 minutes. And this is like a format that was pretty much laid out with Star Wars, actually. The first Star Wars, you got the first 20 minutes, you've got the space fights. The second 20 minutes, you've got the space chase, where you're in, you know, where Mum and Dad are killed. So Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru are killed by the stormtroopers. So, right. So instead of being, right, so the Imperial stormtroopers are chasing you. You know, in Attack of the Clones, it's exactly the same. Cold open, you know, plane lands. Oh, I guess we weren't in that much threat after all. Thing blows up. Then the quest is someone's going to try and kill the princess. Who's trying to kill the princess? Then you chase who's trying to kill the princess. Then you go to a different world about every 20 minutes, and that's how, you know, movies work. Is it's a scene of Stanley Kubrick called them submersible units. Stanley Kubrick said if you've got 6 submersible units in a movie, then the rest of it is just interconnective tissue. And by 6 submersible units, he meant you've got 6 scenes or 6 segments that stand really cleverly to kind of tell the story. Now, a story works in 3 parts, and, you know, Attack of the Clones is the second part of a standard 3-act play. So the first act is you set everything up, you've got exposition, you've got stasis, and you've got a crisis that's going to settle it, or more correctly threaten it. Act 2 is generally working through the crisis and the problem, and Act 3 is the resolution. And normally something's changed so that it's not just you've got a hard reset and you don't get to the end of it and go, oh my god, they killed Kenny, and then Kenny comes back. That's not how drama works. Drama works with stasis, crisis, and resolution, and the resolution is never the same as stasis. Something's happened in the meantime, something's moved forward in it. And so Attack of the Clones is exactly the same. You've got your stasis, which is everything's okay. You've got your crisis, which is the murder attempt upon Padme. And then you've got your resolution, which is the investigation of it, and then finding out where things are. But it also sits within inside, you know, the 3-act play of the 3 films of stasis, crisis, and resolution. Now, Attack of the Clones, I think, is a really great film. It's got a couple of annoying bits in it, because that's what Hayden Christensen was tasked to do. It's got some really awful dialogue about sand, and I'm beginning to think George Lucas has never actually been in love, because that's not how people who are in love talk. Although sometimes, you know, when I was young, probably about the age of Hayden Christensen, and I started talking to girls, and I started to like girls, and I would say stupid things. I hate sand, it's awful, it's not as nice as you, you know, that kind of stuff. I was just really gawky, and those of you who remember me from that age, please don't tell me that I was even worse than that, because I don't think I was. Attack of the Clones has this wonderful kind of series of escalating elements that goes in it. You know, Hayden Christensen, clearly a character who's in the midst of puberty, We've got the height of the Republic that's going on around it. So, you get to see Coruscant, you get to see the nightclubs, you get to see all of that stuff that's going on with it. You've got Dexter, who's almost like an American graffiti style bar. You've got lots of military porn in there. You've got shots of stormtroopers, dark troopers, all that type of stuff. And it starts to also have polarizing language in there. So you start to see the machinations of how a political situation can change from something that's relatively stable to something that's quite unstable. And there are parallels to be drawn between that and the fall of major democracies into dictatorships, or dark periods in human history. So huge chunks of Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith are very clearly based upon military films from the 30s and 40s. You can match up shot by shot stuff from Triumph of the Will and stuff in Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith that's meant to show you kind of look how amazing and fantastic this technology is, but at the same point grappling with a question that's asked in Jurassic Park, which is it got to the point where you didn't ask whether you should, you just asked whether you could. And again, the minimum age range that the story's told from is probably about the age of Anakin Skywalker, probably someone who's maybe 18, 19, 20, that type of age. But what you do get to see is also you get to see large-scale Jedi battles. The whole thing escalates very, very quickly because darkness never comes out into the daylight. Evil dictatorships, all that stuff, they like to do things quietly in a corner. They're not sitting around advertising, hey guys, we're the baddies. They're just quietly going on being evil bastards in the corner, and they're not telling you what they're up to. And when it gets unveiled, it's like that thing where you lift a rock up and all of a sudden you're looking at like 1,000 weevils that go, what? No, we're just busy being weevils, mate. They're not interested in doing things in a way that's visible. So it escalates very, very quickly, although really it's just been escalating very, very slowly and you haven't necessarily seen it. You've got, since it's the birth of the Republic, you've got a lot, the aged appearance of Star Wars has gone, so a lot of new, fresh, unused equipment, new technology that you've seen before, embryonic designs, I've got here's the art of Attack of the Clones, and you look at that art, it's been clearly designed to the umpteenth level of knowledge and dexterity, and people have been looking at it and going, well, this stuff's got to be there for a reason. So whereas in the first movie they were like, well, we're going to buy some battleships, I'm going to make some models out of it. In this one they're asking questions like, well, why is that there? What does that button do? And everything that's in there does something. So it's been thought through and thought about, and then you get to the point where you've got the massive fight at the end, and you've got the classic Drew Struzan poster here, and you've got the screenplay, by the way, that's at the end of the art book. But what you've got is a really dense, interesting story. Now, I don't want to do a Rick McCallum and say it's so dense. There's layers upon layers. It's like visual poetry. Everything rhymes. No. Attack of the Clones is just a bloody great science fiction movie. It's more mature than The Phantom Menace, and it goes through and it slowly escalates everything. So even the force powers that we see in there, we see force lightning for the first time. We see things like moving objects, although it's very, very briefly alluded to in Phantom Menace. I don't know if you remember in Phantom Menace, the showdown with Darth Maul, there's a bit where Darth Maul wants to open a door, and he uses his force powers to pick up an object and hit an open switch at the door over in the corner. But in Attack of the Clones, this stuff really starts to come out. You really start to see how it all works. But it's an interstellar detective whodunit, with a couple of really interesting moments that I'm going to point out. All of the wipes in all of the films, by the way, are 32 frames long, and they're Pulp Fiction wipes, and they're designed to focus you on. So, for example, if the wipe goes left to right, it's going, you're meant to look at the thing that's over there. That's how it's designed to do. But it's a really bold sequel, because if you were to write a sequel from The Phantom Menace and it was going to be done by a committee and Damon Lindelof was going to shit all over it because he can't write his way out of a paper bag, and neither can J.J. Abrams, then what you've got is actually a really bold sequel that totally escalates all the tensions. And there are things in there that when you look back and think about them, that makes sense. But at the start you go, whoa, that's some heavy stuff. When you start off Phantom Menace, you're certainly not expecting that by the end of the next movie you've got an interstellar war between an army of clones and an army of robots, with the Jedi fighting off against the dark forces of evil and what appears to be an attempt to overthrow the whole of the Republic. That's not in there. And you've got you've got a couple of really interesting things. So you've got Jango Fett, who's in there. Not sure I agree with Jango Fett, but when you look at the film, by the way, Jango Fett is clearly dead on the in the battlefield of Geonosis. Because if you pause it, what you can see is when his head gets cut off, there are two objects that come flying. One is suspiciously head shaped, the other one is helmet shaped. So when Boba, his clone son, is staring at the helmet, he's staring at an empty helmet. He's not staring at a helmet that's got his dead dad's head in it, bleeding on the floor. I mean, we leave that darkness for Revenge of the Sith, and also, by the way, you will see in Attack of the Clones, you will see the first appearance of the Dark Trooper. Now, the Dark Trooper may not mean anything to many of you, but if you ever played Dark Forces in 1995, that's your Dark Trooper. He's basically a one-man robot killing machine. And he's all over Attack of the Clones. And I loved it when I saw that. I'm like, that's Dark Trooper. And I used to play the heck out of Dark Forces at the computer game in 1995. Sold 952,000 units, of which one was definitely mine. It's basically Doom set in the Star Wars universe, and it was the best computer game that I probably played in the 90s, apart from Grand Theft Auto. But Attack of the Clones is just a great science fiction movie. It goes to places you wouldn't have thought. There are moments and scenes in that where your imagination, like, who would have thought of that? No one else was doing anything like that, apart from possibly Peter Jackson in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. But in terms of that whole kind of battle that you've got at the end of Geonosis, you've got hundreds of clone troopers, thousands of clone troopers, dozens of spaceships, all using the cutting edge CGI technology. And I was like, this is Star Wars. This is, when they were talking about the Clone Wars, this is it. This is the start of the bloody Clone Wars. These are the things that I was imagining when I was a young'un. And Attack of the Clones is a great movie. And if you don't like it because you don't like Hayden Christensen, well, Hayden Christensen's character, Anakin Skywalker, is meant to be an annoying, immature, petulant, childish brat. That's why he gets seduced by the dark side, because he's not very grown up. And if he annoyed you, that was the bloody point. He was doing his job. And frankly, he may not be the best actor in the world. He's a heck of a lot better than Shia LaBeouf. But he did his job. Now, I'm going to move on from Attack of the Clones because I thought it was really, really good. And I'm going to go on to a little known part of the franchise. Is what happened next is these two animated features, the Clone Wars, which were directed by, I think, the guy that did was it Ghost in the Shell? Jendi Tarkovsky. And these are animated films that kind of bridge the gap between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. They're pretty difficult to find. They're not on Blu-ray. They're probably on YouTube. But they're really interesting, useful connective tissue that fill in the gaps. Not essential watching, but if you can find them, by all means, watch them. It just explains some really interesting stuff, and you get to see extra bits of Force powers. You get to see characters that turn up in Revenge of the Sith, and just really fun, animated Star Wars that takes the taste of the holiday special out of your mouth. Now, the third of the prequels, Revenge of the Sith. I love this film. It's top 3 Star Wars for me. Undoubtedly top 3. Maybe top 4, depending on how generous I'm feeling towards Rogue One on any given day. But you think about it, if that was the third Star Wars film you watched, you didn't see Star Wars, you didn't see Empire Strikes Back, you didn't see Return of the Jedi, and you were like, okay, so, it starts off 20 minutes, fantastic space battle. Real cutting edge, brilliant space battle that was really just confident and assured, and the dialogue just flowed, and everything about it was fine. And by the way, this is the book with the concept art in that shows you all of the stuff that's going on. And there's stuff, that in the film you wouldn't have thought about. And you're kind of going, okay, so Anakin's a a Jedi now, Obi-Wan Kenobi. He's not amazing, but he's pretty good. He's going to do that, and then you go, right, so, and you go, right, okay, so it's going to be these two guys. They're going to be off, mates, saving the world and the universe from the bad guys. They're going to find Count Dooku, they're going to stop him, and then they're going to stop Emperor Palpatine from taking over the world, and everything's going to be all right. And then, oh my God, it's a fucking Shakespearean tragedy, which literally just takes your heart and throws it into pieces and goes, no, this is what's happened. The bad guys win sometimes. The good guys do not always win. And it's just a great movie. If it had been the third movie you'd have watched, if it come out in 2005, and by the way, if Star Wars had come out in 2009 or something, if Revenge of the Sith had come out in 2005, it'd been the third movie, all the hardcore sci-fi geeks would have been, my God, it's incredible. You won't believe what happens. You've been led a merry dance up to this to believe that everything's going to be all right and the good guy's going to win. And he flips it over, and there's points in that movie when you still go, it's not the end, is it? You can still, it's still not too late to save things. And then all of a sudden, you realise it is too late. The house of cards is going to collapse. Everything's going to go wrong. It's a fantastic political tragedy in the way in which no one else has ever really done. Most of the time you start the movies, the bad guys are in power, the good guys are the terrorists that are going to go and blow up the Death Star or whatever, and they're going to go and take over the world, going to make everything right. This one, you still think the good guys might win, but then there comes a point you suddenly realise there's no way the good guys are going to win, are they? Everything is going to go to hell in a handbasket. It's got the best opening shot of any of the films in the trilogy. It's like watching a pirate movie where you've got actual, that battle in the atmosphere above Coruscant, and you've got these massive spaceships that are just firing huge rounds of ammunition at each other and blowing each other out of the sky. And you've got the Dooku fight as well, where Obi-Wan Kenobi is knocked unconscious, and it's just Anakin and Senator Palpatine and Dooku, and Anakin being, as I said, immature and petulant, is like, well, if I kill him, I just solve all the problems, don't I? We don't have to bother with the trial or anything. Just takes his head off, and that's it. And if you didn't know this was going to happen, if you didn't know this was how it was going to go down, you'd be shocked. You'd be appalled, and everyone would go, "Oh God, he's pulled off, the cinematic coup of the decade," because you were meant to believe all this was going to be one thing, but actually, no, completely not. I mean, the first hour is breezy, it's fun, the dialogue rolls off the tongues, and then you've got this lovely little sequence about 63 minutes in, where Senator Palpatine and Anakin are talking, and the mural in the background is really important because it depicts a battle between good and evil, and Senator Palpatine does it a couple of times, but in this case he says, you've got to understand good and bad. You can't know love without knowing hate. You've got to know, if you want to know light, you have to know darkness as well, because without darkness there is no light, and vice versa. And then, if you're watching the film from a certain point of view and you go, oh my God, yeah, it all makes sense. You have to understand it all. And then you get seduced by it. It's basically The Godfather 2 in space. It's a huge tragedy which sees the beginning of the end of the Empire. And the Jedi's are, arrogant goody two-shoes that think, well, we've got the Force, it'll show us everything, we'll be okay, we'll see all the things, we've got more mind power, but no, they don't, do they? And then it all gets toppled, and Emperor Palpatine, as is, just goes, execute Order 66, and the House of Cards comes falling down. You've got this wonderful montage of just basically death and murder that, in the same way, kind of mirrors a scene that is very much in the vicinity, where Padme and Anakin are looking at each other silently across Coruscant, whilst Anakin decides that he's going to become Darth Vader. He's going to give in to evil. He's going to try and use that power to save the woman that he loves and everything that goes with it. But it's the greatest contract that was ever pulled, because all of a sudden he gets to the end and he realises he's been marked. He's the con. The weight of expectations that sits upon him is awful, and he's been taken advantage of. Now, in Revenge of the Sith, by the way, I should also point out that it is a Shakespearean style tragedy. There's a slow, creeping attack of inevitability about it, and the point when suddenly you realise that everything is just too late to be saved. Why do people do that? Why are people weak? Why do people give in to temptation? All of that is then linked to the element where, she says, well, this is how democracy dies, not with, with thunderous applause. It's exactly how it happens. And the images return to things that, you wouldn't necessarily have thought about. There's some really great dark comedy in the film as well. There's a scene where Yoda walks into Emperor Palpatine's room. There's these 2 red Imperial guards. Now, these red Imperial guards were legendary. They were like badass. What are they going to be like? Yoda just goes, poof, and they're just poof, gone. Hilarious, but it's all about, and then it's all about tragedy, really. It's all about how things you thought were certain aren't certain anymore, and get thrown away and turned upside down. Also, by the way, you see, I don't know if you remember, there's some tanks in the scene on Kashyyyk. If you know your Star Wars toys, those were actually, I think, based upon tanks that were made by Mattel in the late 80s, when they had to make up their own new Star Wars tanks. So they kind of took toys and made them canon. I don't know why I'm mentioning that. But Revenge of the Sith is, a great movie, and at the end of it, you've got that battle at Mustafar, and it's just a tragedy, because as far as Darth Vader, Anakin Skywalker, is concerned, he did all of this to save the life of his wife, and he ends up with his arms and legs chopped off on a volcano planet, burnt to death, and it becomes a horror, almost like he becomes Frankenstein's monster. The scene where he's on the operating table and you see the helmet coming towards him, and you see what's through the helmet, and you just see this fear that sits in there, and he suddenly realizes, that's the only way that I'm going to survive this, is by becoming a monster. And then, and by the way, Disney announced that they're going to be doing a series of TV shows based on what happens next, Obi-Wan, with Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen. Now, I think that's all going to be driven by the fact that, as far as Darth Vader is concerned, the last time he saw Obi-Wan Kenobi was gloating over him. His wife was dead, and he'd had his arms and legs cut off, and he was just about to be turned into a robot. And then that's why I think Darth Vader was permanently furious throughout the rest of the movies. It's like the Incredible Hulk. He's not the angry guy that stays inside. He's always angry. Darth Vader is just like this simmering pot of rage that was betrayed by the Jedi, and he bloody hates them, and he's going to find them and he's going to kill them because they destroyed his life. His life was going to be great. He'd been in love with Padme. She was pregnant. They were going to go and rule the galaxy together, and then all of a sudden, he's a murderous goon in a robot suit with a whole bunch of issues, who probably still listens to Limp Bizkit or possibly My Chemical Romance and Nine Inch Nails. I don't really know, but Revenge of the Sith is an incredible film, and I watched it. I had tears in my eyes when I was watching it. I was like, this is it. This is the tragedy of what happens when you become corrupt by the world, when you become weak, when you start to betray your principles. It's all there. It's all in the movie. And if that was the third movie that he'd made, and you hadn't got to live with the expectations around Return of the Jedi, The Empire Strikes Back, and Star Wars itself, you'd have gone, bloody hell, George Lucas is one of the most amazing filmmakers on the planet. And it's only because everyone's so nostalgic for the original Star Wars movies, with that hipster tooting Han Solo guy and that love story that's so innocent, is that you'd sit there and go, actually, no, those prequel movies are science fiction classics. If they'd been the only Star Wars films that had been made, everyone would have been like, he was incredible and legendary. Not even on a technical basis, purely on a storytelling basis, because no one's done a story like that. No one's done a story where the bad guys win, the hero turns into the bad guy, and everything falls apart. And so, yeah, I'm a prequel apologist because they're really bloody good, and you need to take your prejudices away from yourself if you think they're awful. They're not perfect. I'm never going to pretend they're perfect, but just watch them with an open mind. If you've never seen Star Wars, just watch them again, and then at the end of that third film, when everything's gone to hell and back, and the Empire has ruled, the Republic has fallen, everyone's dead, and you go, God, what balls to have that as a film, as a series of films, which ends with a tragedy with no redemption. That's where I'm going to end, I think. I could talk for years about the films. I've not even shown you half of the books I've got down here. Next time we talk about Star Wars, I'm going to talk about the original movies, and I'm going to talk about my impressions of those. And then after that, I am going to get to talking about U2's War. I'm going to talk about Suede's Dog Band Star. I'm going to talk about a few other things as I go along. But I think 3/4 of an hour of me talking at you about Star Wars, whilst I basically hyperventilate and talk very, very quickly, like I've taken drugs in a 90s nightclub, but I haven't. I'm going to stop there. Now, I have friends. Hello, people. I was told these episodes feel a bit like watching Film 87 with Barry Norman. And that's not a bad thing at all. I'm just have to work on my jokes, if that's the case. But this has been film 99 to 05 with Mark Reed, not with Barry Norman. And I think I'm going to wrap up here, and we will come to talking about the original Star Wars films next. As usual, nice comments, questions, subscribe, all the usual stuff. Nice to see you. Don't know when I'm going to do another one of these, but it won't be too long. And I'll see you all again soon. Okay, and bye.